Trump's zigzag on Iran talks is adding fuel to an already raging global energy crisis. With Trump refusing to return to the table, oil prices are surging for a seventh straight day. Global markets are catching their breath and the dollar is steady as Iran hints it may restart negotiations. Tonight, it's Iran's next move that could sway the world economy, raising questions over whether Trump is being pushed to the sidelines. Oil prices continued their surge on April 28, rising for the seventh straight day as hopes of a breakthrough in the US-Iran talks faded. Benchmark Brent crude futures climbed to around $108.68 a barrel, extending strong gains from the previous trading session and approaching the $110 mark. US benchmark West Texas Intermediate, or WTI, also pushed higher, advancing to about $97 a barrel on renewed supply fears. Analysts say the rally is being driven largely by the stalemate between Washington and Tehran, with stalled negotiations dampening hopes of a swift resolution to the conflict. Remember, Trump abruptly called off a planned round of Iran talks on April 25, later saying Tehran could call the US if it wants to talk, a move that added fresh uncertainty to the diplomatic track. Since then, a new Iranian proposal has surfaced, reportedly demanding an end to the war, removal of the US blockade, and then a reopening of the Strait of Hormuz. Crucially, Iran has pushed detailed nuclear discussions into a later phase, a sequencing that has not gone down well in Washington, according to diplomatic reporting. Meanwhile, ongoing disruptions in the Strait of Hormuz have sharply restricted oil shipments through the narrow waterway. Hormuz, which handles roughly a fifth of global seaborne energy flows, remains heavily constrained, keeping pressure on crude prices worldwide. Amid Iran's closure of the Strait of Hormuz and a tightening US blockade, fears have resurfaced that global oil exports could be choked off almost overnight. In practice, analysts say Iran's own energy system is unlikely to simply collapse under this pressure. Instead, it would absorb the shock and gradually adapt through alternative routes, reduced output and discount deals. That difference between a sudden, catastrophic failure and a prolonged period of strain is crucial, not just as a technical point, but for understanding how markets and governments plan for worst-case scenarios. With diplomacy going nowhere and no clear roadmap out of the current standoff, many experts expect oil prices to stay elevated in the near term, keeping pressure on consumers and central banks. Notably, Chevron CEO Mike Wirth has warned that even a ceasefire on its own is unlikely to bring prices sharply down, arguing that deeper structural risks and supply disruptions are now baked into the market. He has also suggested that the consequences of the Hormuz closure and related disruptions will be with us for some time, signaling that this energy shock could linger well beyond any initial peace deal. Iran's parliament speaker appears to have issued a direct warning to the United States over energy leverage, arguing that Tehran still holds what he described as key energy and shipping cards in the confrontation. Mohammad Bagher Kalibaf pushed back against fresh US pressure by suggesting Iran retains decisive strategic options, while American tools are becoming more limited and more expensive to use. Iranian media and regional coverage framed the message as an attempt to puncture US bravado over energy leverage, with Kalibaf contrasting Iran's control over choke points and supply routes against Washington's reliance on market management and reserve releases. Mohammad Bagher Kalibaf said, and I quote, "They brag about the cards. Let's see. Supply cards equals demand cards. SOH, partly played, plus BEM, unplayed, plus pipelines, unplayed, equals INV release, played, plus demand destruction, partly played, plus more price adjective, to come, add summer vacation to the right unless they want to cancel it for the US." Unquote. Analysts viewed Mohammad Bagher Kalibaf's message as a calm, factual warning to US policymakers rather than a burst of rhetoric, according to Press TV's characterization of the statement. Kalibaf appeared to warn Washington not to confuse temporary market maneuvers with genuine strategic strength, arguing that short-term price management does not amount to lasting leverage. That argument rested on the claim that Iran has only partially activated its options so far, including pressure points linked to the Strait of Hormuz and the Bab el-Mandeb Strait. By contrast, the US was portrayed as having already burned through its easiest tools, especially strategic petroleum reserve releases and other near-term demand-side measures. Amid that backdrop, Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi arrived in Russia on April 27 at the head of a diplomatic delegation as Tehran continued regional and great power consultations. At nearly the same moment, a senior Russian envoy publicly backed Tehran on April 26 just before the Iranian minister's Moscow visit, reinforcing the impression of coordinated political support. Russia's permanent representative to international organizations in Vienna, Mikhail Ulyanov, sharply criticized US policy toward Iran in remarks released over the weekend. Ulyanov said Washington's long-running habit of negotiating from a position of strength had failed in the Iran case and no longer offered a workable path forward. He added that military threats and what he called illegal sanctions had also failed against Iran, and argued that the United States would have to abandon blackmail, ultimatums, and artificial deadlines. Stock markets rose after reports said Iran had offered the United States a new proposal, with equities advancing as investors interpreted the move as a possible step toward easing regional tensions and restoring oil flows. Bloomberg-linked reporting said Iran's latest proposal was aimed at reopening the Strait of Hormuz, with a reported framework pairing a reopening move with a delay in nuclear negotiations. Markets stabilized as those reports fueled expectations that some form of diplomacy could restart after a failed second round of talks, even though the broader negotiating track still appeared fragile. The dollar also turned steadier as news of the Iranian proposal surfaced, with market coverage showing investors reassessing haven demand as the possibility of renewed talks briefly improved sentiment. US President Donald Trump has issued a fresh ultimatum to Iran, this time giving Tehran 3 days. Trump told Fox News that Iran now has 3 days before its oil pipelines explode from within. He also claimed there would be permanent damage to Iran's oil wells if oil flow is not restored. Donald Trump said, and I quote, "What happens is that line explodes from within, both mechanically and in the earth. Something happens where it just explodes, and they say they only have about 3 days left before that happens. And when it explodes, you can never rebuild it the way it is. It's a very powerful thing that takes place sort of having to do with nature." Unquote. According to Trump, the ongoing US blockade would create catastrophic mechanical stress inside Iran's oil infrastructure. He further claimed that this pressure could trigger spontaneous explosions underground and within transport lines. However, energy experts say pipelines are typically equipped with safety valves and sensors designed to halt pumping before such failure spiral. They also note that if oil cannot move through the system, operators usually stop production at the source itself. That is why some experts believe Iran may still have roughly 2 to 3 months of inland storage before any forced production cut becomes necessary.
$25 करोड़ गरीब गरीबी को परास्त करके बाहर निकले।
For the good of our nation, let's work together and let's truly make America great again.
The fastest news breaks.
Requested PM saying that look, you will have to speak to Putin and to Zelensky.
The biggest news makers.
The relationship with India is probably the most important bilateral relationship the US will have for the rest of this century.
The capital delivered quite an election result today.
Expert analysis.
The million-dollar question today is how to stop this dance of death.
Ground reports.
I'm standing at the crossroad of the Kumbh Mela. Behind me are more than 100 entry ghats.
Long-form interviews.
Exclusionary politics is reflected in Manipur case as well. You don't bother because this is a small state.
Deep dive into burning issues.
It's often said DRC could be the richest country in the whole world. It's because of what sits underneath.
Why exactly did the US topple the Sheikh Hasina government?
HT videos. We don't just break news, we break it down.